Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's Entrepreneur. Joining me today is Phil Soper, who is president and CEO of Royal LePage. Thanks for joining us once again, Phil.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about a new report that you folks have put out on the recreational housing market in the country. Overall, what stands out for you, Phil, right now from that report?
Probably the parallels we're seeing in urban residential markets. So the strongest markets in the country tend to be uh, the lesser costly markets. So, for example, the slowest cottage market, cabin, chalet, recreational property market in the 2023 to 25 or 24 to 25 timeframe was Ontario. And actually, the GTA was the slowest market on the urban side. BC would be next. Things were fairly slow there. And on the other end of the scale, things are hopping in Quebec. And Atlantic Canada wouldn't be far behind.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? And I just want to touch on that for a second, right? I was in Saskatchewan just recently,
Mhm.
people tend to forget that beyond the pockets of places like BC and in Ontario, right? There are so many places in this country and throughout the provinces that offer great recreational properties, right? Because
It's
if
true.
if the purpose of your having a recreational property is just to get away from things and relax and enjoy things, well, you could do that in somewhere in Saskatchewan just as much as you can in the Okanagan, right?
Oh yeah, I grew up in southern Alberta, as you know, and we talked about, and certainly, gosh, it was popular to go fishing in northern Saskatchewan, and a lot of people have cabins, camps. They just like to get away from the city. I laugh. My sister's in-laws are from Charlottetown on PEI. When my kids were little, hers were little, we'd go out there every summer for a week or so. And her in-laws, I guess my in-laws too, uh, had a cottage, and they were living in Charlottetown on the water in what to me seemed like a cottage, but they'd drive 12 minutes to the North Shore
Yeah.
in what they considered a real cottage. So
Yeah.
people like to get away from the principal residence.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the report itself. Uh,
Sure.
what's happening with prices in that particular segment of the real estate market?
So overall, across the country, prices eased up just a little bit. Um, and the more expensive water fought like 2.3%. So very little, about half the long-term norm. And the pricier waterfront property that is for sale today in places like Ontario Cottage Country or the British Columbia Islands, Gulf Islands, and such is slightly cheaper than it would have been in the spring of 24. So down, call it 3.5%. But it really depends. You actually can see differences lake to lake, let alone province to province. So it really depends on the supply of properties and the attitude in the local urban centers. Are people feeling more positive or feeling the blues because of what's going on south of the border? And it does vary from province to province.
And what's the inventory like for these properties out there in terms of being available for sale?
Yeah, it's better than it was last year. So why does inventory, when is inventory low? Well, it's when people are sort of frozen in place, when they feel um, the the vitality in the market, and they say, now's a good time to sell if they're getting out of cottaging, or now's a good time to upgrade, or we need a place because our family's growing and I feel confident in my job and my situation, you'll see more property brought on the market, which brings inventory up and the overall level of activity. So in general, across the country, activity levels picked up. Coming into 2025, it wasn't for those Trump tariff threats. We were set up for a very strong year economically as a nation.
Yeah.
Lower cost of borrowing across the board. What has it been? The equivalent of 25 basis point cuts to the interest rates over the last 12 months.
Mhm.
Jobs, we keep exceeding the jobs forecast. Just in general, it's been a really strong lead into 2025.
Hmm. Now, you mentioned obviously the tariffs, but we also have the federal election on right now. What is the impact of these situations out there on a market like the recreational housing market? With uncertainty out there, people don't know where the next tariff story is going because it seems to change day by day. And of course, we don't know what party and who the prime minister is going to be until late April. How does that impact the market?
Yeah, in general, provincial politics have a bigger impact on recreational property markets,
Hmm.
whereas federal elections can have bigger impacts on our urban centers. They tend to focus on, macro policies like whether they're going to change tax policy related to temporary housing, whereas provinces can impact recreational property just by changing, think of British Columbia, vacant housing taxes, which put a damper on recreational property owners from Alberta, for example, or making it more restrictive for people to do short-term rentals, the
Yeah.
VRBO, Airbnb thing, sort of a blanket policy that makes sense in urban centers and doesn't make much sense in rural settings. So uncertainty is generally not good for real estate markets, but I think in this case, people were ready for a change, and there's the two leading contenders both are offering considerable change from the previous government. So I think there's more optimism about the potential for change in the country, which obviously helps making a big decision like buying a cabin or a cottage.
And who are these buyers? Like, who typically are you seeing as the main demographic that is on the hunt for recreational properties?
So the biggest buying group, not in dollar amount, but in terms of the number of units, the number of properties being purchased, is the youngish family. I don't say young family because they have to get their principal. Most people buy a principal residence first, and then the cabin, the cottage, the getaway is an optional add-on to their lifestyle, and they like to do it when kids are young. The other cohort, though, that increasingly is being seen in our recreational property markets is the retiring baby boomer. This isn't new, but baby boomers worked or are working. Look at us too,
Yeah,
um, longer than previous generations,
yeah.
and so some of them are delaying their entry into, call it, retirement living, and the whole world of living at a recreational property really has changed with high-speed satellite internet
But
and the kind of conveniences that are now common in recreational property. No one's hauling water from a well, or actually some people still are, but it's very rare.
yeah.
The conveniences of home are often found at the lake in a contemporary recreational property setting. So retiring there and having all the conveniences of home is certainly appealing to baby boomers.
One last thing. I'm curious, where we still have the foreign ban in place,
We do, yes.
and what is the status of that?
So, so there are so many exceptions that we could make another whole interview on them. But recreational property in general is exempt. Worth noting that Canadians are the largest owners of foreigner owners of real estate in America.
Yeah.
Canadians in total own about 1 million properties in the United States, and
Well,
Americans are the largest owners of recreational property in Canada. So if you're looking at Canmore or Whistler or Tremblant, you'll see a lot of Americans who are, for example, escaping the Texas heat. And so I'd remind your listeners to be nice to them. We're polite Canadians.
yeah.
We don't need to burn the stars and stripes they may hang on their veranda.
Yeah. Okay then. Wonderful. Thanks so much, Phil, for joining us again today.
My pleasure, Mario, always.
All right, that was Phil Soper, President and CEO of Royal LePage. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Managing Editor of Canada's Entrepreneur. Thanks for joining us today.